I'm recording as of right now, and everything that you see in here will be put into a video. We will give you a link where you can download that video probably in a few days. All of the material which you see me showing you today, you will also be able to download. So there are some slides which we will go through, and I will also create an NPrinting environment, meaning QVWs, NPrinting file, templates. All of that will be saved into a zip file, and again, you will be able to download that so that if you like, you can then see exactly how I built the templates and how I set up the filters and everything that we do today. So again, welcome everybody to this NPrinting basic course. I'm going to go through initially a couple of slides to talk about hardware and software requirements, and we will then use some slides during the presentation, but most of what we do will be focused on using the product and building an NPrinting project, which again, as I said, I will share with you. So again, questions, please type them into the questions bar. I will be happy to answer all questions. I may not get to them immediately. Some questions I may answer at a later time if it seems more appropriate to do that. So without further ado, as it were, let's start. So hardware and software requirements. NPrinting is a Windows application. There is no non-Windows NPrinting application for now. We are working on a server-side web-based application which will be able to do everything with the exception of building templates, or some templates maybe we will be able to build also from a browser, so a totally web-based app. But for now, it's Windows. Any recent version of Windows will do. Server 2003 and Windows XP will be deprecated fairly soon. Probably in April, I believe Microsoft is also going to deprecate at that time. NPrinting supports Office 2003 and above. Again, Office 2003 may be deprecated soon as well. I believe in April, Microsoft will end extended support for Office 2003. You need the QlikView desktop application to use NPrinting. So when I say that, what I mean is you need this installed on any computer where NPrinting is running. Okay, that includes the NPrinting client and the NPrinting server. They both require the QlikView desktop application as well as a QlikView license. So NPrinting is compatible with QlikView 9, 10, or 11. And you need this even if you're running Enterprise Server or Small Business Edition from QlikView. NPrinting also needs an active license. It can be any license you want, okay, but NPrinting will inherit any limitations which that license has. When I say that, what I mean is if you use a document cal, NPrinting will only be able to build reports and execute reports based on that document. Okay, we recommend a named user cal with full access to all the QVWs. You'll also need .NET Framework 4.0 or higher. Almost everybody has this installed, so that's typically not an issue. Okay. Virtualized applications are not supported. What that means is NPrinting, yes, there's a question. Does NPrinting support Windows 8? The answer is yes, it does. So let me put that back in there too. Yeah, sorry, these are old slides. So NPrinting supports Windows 8. Right. So, right, virtualized applications. NPrinting can run in a virtual environment as long as QlikView, NPrinting, and Office, if it's needed, are installed on a virtual machine. That will work fine. What will not function is if Office, for instance, is virtualized and therefore is not actually installed on that physical or virtual machine with NPrinting. Okay, that will not function. But a virtual environment is fine, and many of our users are running NPrinting in a virtual environment. It won't support a virtualized version of Office or QlikView. For sending out emails, you'll need an SMTP server, access to an SMTP server, or NPrinting can support simple MAPI, so you need a MAPI client installed on the machine, as well as access to Exchange server or whatever the MAPI method is. Okay. If you're using SMTP and the SMTP server requires something which is called Secure Socket Layer, SSL, or Transport Layer Security, which is effectively encryption for email messages, then you will need an application called OpenSSL. It's an open source secure socket layer client for Windows, and you need the 32-bit version of this application. Do not download the 64-bit version, even if you have a 64-bit machine. So, let me very quickly go to the NPrinting website and show you. If you go to our website and you click on Downloads here, you can download the most recent version of the setup file. Okay. If you go down here towards the bottom, here we can download betas. So if I open the betas page, right now we have a beta running for Pixel Perfect. We have a new template editor which I will show you, which allows pixel positioning of objects, both images from QlikView and data we pull in. It also allows you to pull data in, use that to populate a chart, and the output when the output is rendered in PDF is basically pixel perfect. You can also render the output in XL, S, RTF, and a number of other formats, in which case it's not pixel perfect, but it's very good for high resolution PDF output. So that's the beta. If we go back here, there are some requirements, and if you're running NPrinting on demand and you're running QlikView 11.2 SR4 or 11.2 SR5, then you'll need a specific version of Internet Explorer if you're using the IE plugin. Down here we have the required software. So if I go here to OpenSSL, if I'm using SMTP and the SMTP server requires Secure Socket Layer or Transport Layer Security, remember 32-bit version only. If I open this link, it brings me to this downloads page, and the version that you want is this version here. This version down here, Win32 OpenSSL 1.0.1F, the 16 meg installer. So get the full version and get the version for Windows for 32-bit systems. Okay. All right. So let's move along here. This software is being deprecated, right? QlikView 9. Bullzip was used initially in NPrinting to render PDF and image output. It's no longer required. It is only required for legacy. So companies that have not upgraded from NPrinting 11, we're now on NPrinting 14. So Bullzip is not required. And Windows XP and Server 2003 are being deprecated or have been deprecated. When I say deprecated, that just means we do not test on those systems. It doesn't mean that won't work. It just means we do not continue to test as we release versions of NPrinting, so we do not guarantee that they will work. Okay, inside of these slides, there are a number of tutorials. I'm going to share the slides with you. I will also share a document which has all of the tutorials inside of it. So please feel free to use those either for other people in the company, if you want to use them for training for yourself, or if you want to set up a training program for your clients. All of this material will be shared with you, and hopefully you'll find it quite useful. So let's take a look at the application. So this is what NPrinting looks like before we've done anything, and I'm going to very quickly walk through a couple of the parameters. So if I go here into File, Options, up here I can set the language. I can change the color scheme. I I can clear the recent files which appear over here when I click on File. Open as Viewer is, don't use this. This is only for seeing what NPrinting would look like if you're using the basic version, the free version, which is basically a viewer which will allow you to execute reports without filtering or anything like that, or based on something another developer has built. Advanced Error Management, if NPrinting is causing errors, select this. It'll then generate a small XML file with a series of pieces of information in it which our developers use to troubleshoot. So if you're having problems with NPrinting, you might want to select this. The file gets built and it prompts you to send an email out to our development team. Make option settings common to all users. This is legacy, but it's required if you're running the NPrinting server. Okay. Report settings. This is the default folder where output will be saved. It's very easy to change this inside of your tasks, and I'll show you how to do this. This is the default report name. Obviously, you can change this. This is the default location where templates will be saved, and we'll see how NPrinting prompts me to save templates in here. Actually, let me change this quickly to here. Okay, so now all the templates will be saved, or I'll be prompted to save templates in this location by default. The rest of this is legacy, including the default printer. Email settings. If you're using SMTP, you need the SMTP server name. You may be required to set the port number depending on your network setup. Any network admin can explain that to you. If you're using transport layer security, remember that you're going to need to download and install OpenSSL. So be sure that you go here and get OpenSSL. You may, typically your SMTP server will require authentication. You need an SMTP server username and password. Normally it's an email address. One thing that we strongly recommend is that you generate a dedicated user for NPrinting for the SMTP server. The reason for that is many SMTP servers have rules. For instance, each user can only send 500 email messages in a day because they want to avoid denial of service attacks. So NPrinting may need to send, say, 3,000 email messages in a day. You may want to change the security settings for this specific user on the SMTP server, which is why you'd want a dedicated user. Log settings. NPrinting generates a very verbose log file, both for the application, which is what we're looking at now, as well as NPrinting server. The log file is saved in this location. This is the name of the log file. We put the date onto the name, and we make a new file every day. The files do not get deleted or overwritten, so if you need to get rid of them, you need to manually go in and delete them. However, we generate a new file every day. We can also set up notifications. If I want, I can send a message every time NPrinting generates an error and or a warning, or if the schedule is successful, the message will be sent from this email address to any email addresses in here, semicolon separated. And if I want, I can tell NPrinting to attach that day's log file onto the email message. Finally, here in resources, we can check for updates, and we can manage our product activation, meaning our license. So if I click on activation here, this will open the activation window. This is my activation code. Okay, I'm going to copy this and put it into a text file. Make sure I don't lose it. And I can, if I want to move my NPrinting license from one machine to another, copy the code, deactivate NPrinting, go to the new machine, and activate NPrinting again. Deactivation will open a slot for that activation code. The other thing I'm going to quickly show you is, so I need to activate a code, and I will put that code back in here. I can activate online if I have access to the internet from this machine. Many servers do not have access to the internet. So what you will need to do in the case of a machine which doesn't have access to the internet, or if you're behind a firewall or proxy server, activate offline by clicking down here. you need to generate and save a request file. The request file is a very small XML file. You send this file to our support team. So let me just save it in here. Send that file to our support team. They will send you back a response file. Click on I have a response file, browse to find the file, select it, open it. That activates NPrinting on the local machine. Okay, I'm going to activate online because I don't want to go through that whole process. The offline process takes a few minutes. However, you have to be able to get in touch with our support team. And so if you know you're going to have to do this in the off hours. So our support currently is from 9 a.m. European time until 6 p.m. U.S. Pacific. So if you're in Europe, it's from 9 a.m. until midnight. If you're on the East Coast of the U.S., it's from 3 a.m. until 9 p.m. Okay? If you're on the West Coast of the United States, it is from midnight until 6 p.m. We will be adding 24-hour support. We're going to hire people probably in Australia who will be able to cover the entire Asia region, and therefore we will be offering 24-hour support, particularly to our largest customers who are requiring this to use NPrinting. Okay, is it possible to use a variable to stock the mail addresses? It is possible to load email addresses automatically. And we'll see how we do that. In the log settings, no, not in the log settings. The log settings are fixed. There's no way to change that. Okay, so the log setting, if I go in here, I cannot change. These are not variable email addresses. They can't be different for each task. Okay, we're working on a version of NPrinting. It'll probably come out in Q2 of this year, which will have a whole series of improvements on the administrative features, hopefully including a calendaring function, which reports are being sent on which days and who are they being sent to. That's not very easy to see right now in NPrinting. It'll have more features around log file distribution and a whole bunch of other things that will help in terms of promoting NPrinting from one environment to another. So if you build an NPrinting project on your test server and you want to move it to your production server, that will be released, as I said, probably in Q2 of this year. Okay, so we were talking about offline activation. That's the basics of how that works. Again, as I was saying, right, so we'll be offering support 24 hours a day starting quite soon. But if you need to do an offline activation now, and it's going to be on a Sunday or something like that, just let us know in advance and we will make arrangements. Okay, so we've set up our NPrinting, the parameters, and let's build a new NPrinting project. So I click on New. Okay, and the first thing NPrinting does is says, great, you want to do make some reports? You need to tell me which QVW you're going to use for these reports. So build a connection. Connections tell NPrinting which QVW to use. So I'll build a connection, call it Sales Demo, click on this Browse button here. This opens this window, and I find my QVW, Sales Demo, click on Open. And this populates this with a path, and now I can start building reports based on that QVW. Now, a couple of things about the connection. One, I can make the default connection, and that means that every time I make a new filter, NPrinting will, at first, show me this connection in order to find fields and field values for the filter. It's very easy to switch between connections, and we'll see that in a moment. Clear all selections. If I open my QVW, and I have, say, a macro which runs on open, which applies a selection, say, for the current year, I probably do not want that selection applied to my report. If I do not want the selection applied to the report, in my connection, I select clear all selections, and then the behavior of NPrinting will be start session with ClickView, open QVW, clear all selections, like so. This will clear locked and unlocked selections. Okay, it will not affect section access. It won't change anything in the data model. It will just clear all of your selections. Okay. Okay. Sorry, let me just very quickly do something here. Okay. And here. Right. So let me minimize this and save and close this. So NPrinting says, do you want to create an object list to speed up processes? What that does is it builds a list of every chart, every field, every image object in the QVW that I may want to put into my reports. That gets saved into my NPrinting project, and then when I go to build a report or a filter or whatever, that process is much faster because I have all of the information about the charts and filters that I need saved in the NPrinting project. Now, it only saves metadata, okay? It does not save field values. It just saves field names. It doesn't save the information in the chart. It just saves the chart ID, okay? So let's keep on building more. Let's say I want to build reports with information from multiple QVWs, and now in NPrinting, I can build a report with data from as many QVWs as I want. So I'll go down here into Sources, click on Connection up here, and I'll build a second connection. This one I will call Sales Compass. Again, I click on the Browse button, find the Sales Compass QVW, click Open, clear all selections, save and close. And I'll do this again here as well. Okay. Now, okay. I can also, from inside the connection, if I know that the QVW has changed, meaning I've added new charts, I click on Refresh Object List, and that will refresh the list. But I can also build a second kind of QVW. So if I click on connection, I click on connection here. And if I click here on server name, I can also connect to my QVW using what's called QVP, ClickView Protocol. Okay, so to do that, I type in the server name, and mine is localhost, but trust me, it works in the real world as well. Click on the Browse button. This launches, in my case, ClickView Server, and opens a window with the QVWs in that server. I click on OK, and they get added in here. Again, select clear all selections. Okay. With Refresh Object List, I had a QVW with 4 charts that showed over 100 objects. What is included in this object list? So I'm writing down a list of some of the most of the things that it includes. So it includes the object list includes not only charts, fields, sheets, ClickView reports, other image objects like list boxes. Okay, that's why you got 100 objects, even though there were only 4 charts. Does that answer the question? Okay, great, excellent. Okay, so right, I've connected through a server, and what's the advantage or disadvantage? Why would I want to do one or the other? Let me quickly open an architecture diagram and show this to you. So this is the current NPrinting architecture. Over here, I have what we call the NPrinting client. Okay, it is a Windows app. It's a desktop application. As I said, it requires QlikView Desktop to function properly and a QlikView license. In this case, you typically also have Microsoft Office installed because you need Office to modify Microsoft Office templates. You don't need Office if you're only doing HTML or now Pixel Perfect. And we'll see, I'll show you exactly what that means. You don't need Office if you're going to do QlikView reports either. Over here, we have our NPrinting server. NPrinting server is a Windows service plus a management console. We'll take a look at it later. There is no user functionality. The only functionality of the service is to read the schedules in your NPrinting projects and execute them at the appropriate time. That's all it does. It's also the generation and distribution engine. You don't need Microsoft Office for this to run, even if you're doing, say, XLSX or PPTX output. Okay, it does not require Office. It does not require any kind of PDF printer. All that is internal to the engine. Okay, again, that works through the QlikView Desktop application. And we can access our QVWs either by doing a local open, which means opening them on the local machine, or we can access through QVP. Okay, so the server-style connection means using QVP. And what's the advantage or disadvantage? Well, the advantage of using QVP is file gets opened on the server, okay? And if a file is opened on the server, then from my laptop, I will be able to with 4 gig of RAM, I can access a QVW, which is 16 gigs large, because my server has, 64 gig of RAM, okay? So if you're developing, and you're developing on a very large QVW, you want to use the server-style connection, because otherwise you will not be able to physically open that QVW on your local machine in order to do the development work. Just like if you're developing the QVW and making a new dashboard, you'll want to do the same thing. What's the disadvantage? Why not always use QVP? Well, first of all, not everybody has QlikView Server. But almost everybody does now, almost all of our clients. And so the other reason is there are certain types of tasks which NPrinting can execute, but only through what's called a local connection. So we can't reload a QVW through QVP. We can only reload a QVW through a local connection. We can't run a macro through QVP. We can only run a macro through a local connection. If anybody has any questions about this, or anything, of course, please do ask me. Right, so we've built a couple of connections. Let's save and close this. And I don't want to do this time. And while we're here, I'm going to very quickly show you something which we'll use later on. As I said before, NPrinting can build reports based on multiple QVWs. And NPrinting can also do things like, for instance, build a worksheet for every country and show data for that country only on that specific worksheet. Now, if we have objects coming in from multiple QVWs, we need to find a way of synchronizing those two QVWs in order to get the appropriate output. So how do we do that? Click on Linked Fields, and we're going to build a linked field. Linked fields associate two dimensions or two or more dimensions from two or more QVWs. So I'll call this countries, matching, and I'll explain this in just a minute. Click on Add. This opens a window with a list of fields. In the sales demo, my default QVW, I can switch to the other QVW very quickly. Sorry. Let's go to sales demo, find the country field, and click on OK. It gets added down here, and notice that the connection is listed down here. Click on Add again, switch connections, find the country field, select it, and click on OK. Now notice that the field names are different. Okay, that doesn't matter. As long as the two fields contain information which is compatible, meaning countries and account country means the same thing, then I'll be able to appropriately filter objects from both QVWs and populate them to the appropriate location in an NPrinting report. We'll see how this happens in just a moment. Okay. Now, one other thing, and the reason that I wrote matching here is NPrinting can keep the matching values only, or we can keep all the values in both QVWs. Now, in most cases, I use matching values only, and the reason is if I had a country, say, I don't know, Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone was a value in one of my QVWs but not in the other, and I had say a worksheet with all the data from, a worksheet for every country, I would have a Sierra Leone worksheet. One of the objects, or the objects from one QVW, would be populated because there are values for the Sierra Leone value of the country field in that QVW. The objects from the other QVW would be blank. Why? Because there's no data for Sierra Leone in that other QVW. Okay, so normally I use matching. It's just easier to see what's going on, and also tends to give you better data. But it may be useful to show both. Depends on what you're trying to do. So let me save and close this, and I can build as many linked fields as I want. They're very easy to build. And so year, for instance, is one of those fields where you have to be quite careful about how you build a matching field, a linked field, sorry, because here, if I go to my second QVW, here we go, and I select the second QVW, and I go to year. Notice that there's, forecast year and opportunity close year. Now, those two values may have totally different meanings in the context of those QVWs, and may or may not match the, logical concept of year in the other QVW. So you have to be quite careful, or at least a little bit careful, about how this is done, especially with things like time, right? Is it fiscal year or is it calendar year? Are fiscal year and calendar year the same thing? Maybe, maybe not. At any rate, so this is, it's quite important to pay attention to, or to understand the data model when we build our linked fields. Okay, so we've built connections to some QVWs. We have built some linked fields. Now we're going to do, we are going to build some filters and some recipients, and then we're going to build some reports. So I start with filters and recipients first, because filters can be applied to recipients and reports, and we'll see that. And once we have our recipients, we'll then be able to send our reports to the recipients. So it seems like we're going backwards perhaps, but I think this is a more fruitful way of doing things. So let me click on filters, and let me quickly go back to our presentation and go down to the section where we talk about filters. Okay, so there are three types of filters. Filters with fields, okay, which can either contain values or formulas. Filters which contain existing ClickView bookmarks. And filters with ClickView variables, okay. These are not really filters, but they allow us to set the value of an existing ClickView variable. Okay. Filters can be multi-connection. Okay, I can use a linked field in my filter and therefore filter for the values, say, of the country field against multiple QVWs. See how that works in just a moment. You can build as many fields with as many field values as you want. You can have multiple values, or multiple values in the same field is like an OR, right? So if I have a filter for the country field with Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, it's Germany or Switzerland or Austria. In exactly the same way that ClickView applies filters. Okay. You can add fields that are not in the database. So for instance, I could add in Sierra Leone. If it were not a value in my QVW, the filter would still work. Once Sierra Leone is added into the QVW, the values for Sierra Leone would then be added to any report which contains that filter. And you can use ClickView formulas in these filters as well. So let's do that. Let's build some filters. So I click on filters, click up here, I build a filter, and notice I have fields, variables, or bookmarks. So we'll start with fields. We'll call it countries. We'll click on add. Okay. And now I click on this browse button. This opens a window with all the fields in my default QVW. Okay. And if we go to the very bottom of this list, so this is the ClickView ID here in the middle column. If we go to the very bottom, we have these two objects with these unique IDs. These are our linked fields. So if I use this field, countries matching, and click on OK, right? And I now click on Add Values. Notice how I have a whole series of field values. These are grayed out. These are the values that are not matching. These up here are the values that match. So I can select, say these 4 values. This filter can be applied to one or both, or reports which have data from one or both of those QVWs, and everything will be filtered in the appropriate way. Okay. Let me now build a filter based on time, which will use an expression instead of, or a formula instead of a fixed value. So I'll build a filter for last year. I do that by clicking on Add here, click on the Browse button, find the year field, select it. I could also do this linked field. I'll just use the regular one. Click on OK. I could click on Add Values, right, and add a value in like this. Or I can click on this plus sign, just add a row in here, and I can add in a formula. Okay, this is ClickView syntax. Now, I need to select Evaluate because I want to make sure NPrinting evaluates this instead of treating it as a text string, which it will otherwise do. Also, I want to say is numeric because this will return a numeric value. It will then be evaluated against this field to generate the filter for, in this case, last year. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay, now let me very quickly walk through these parameters up here. They are also in the slides, so let me pull up the slides here, right here. Okay, so there's a fairly detailed explanation of what they mean in here. There are also tutorials about this, but just very quickly, locked will lock the field. No other filters will be able to be applied to this field for that task. And we'll see what a task is in a minute. Unlock if locked. If the field is locked, this will unlock it. Select excluded. All the values for year except, in this case, last year. Verify filter. If this filter renders a null data set, the report will be suppressed. Let's see what that means exactly in the QVW. So if I open my QVW, and let me switch to a different one, and I apply a selection like this one, okay? If I go and check this object, there's no data to display. There's no data to display because it turns out that this chart only shows data for this year and last year, and 2010 is neither this year nor last year. Okay? If this is the only object in the report, and I have verify filter applied, the report will be suppressed. It will not be delivered. It's kind of like conditional reporting. We can also build report conditions, which is something we will not talk about today. But, okay. So verify filter makes sure that the report is populated with some data. If it's not, then the report will not be delivered. Very important because we typically don't want to send out blank reports. Okay, so notice now it's populated because I removed that filter. Okay. And then finally, there's a parameter which is drop field and reduce. NPrinting can do effectively do loop and reduce in a similar way to QuickView Publisher. We can generate filtered QVWs and deliver those to recipients. If you do that and a filter in that task has drop field and reduce applied, what will happen is the year field in this case, for instance, would be in the data set to maintain data integrity, but the recipient of the recipient of that QVW would not be able to actually see the year field in the QVW. So the field is there, but it's suppressed. Okay. Any questions about filtering for fields and field values, or fields and formulas? Do these filters override the clear on open checkbox? Yes, they do. So yes, they do override the clear on open checkbox. They are applied after the QVW is open. Okay, we'll see exactly how this works. Let me build a couple more filters. We'll build some recipients, and then we'll see how they get applied to our reports. Okay. So let me now build a filter which will use an existing ClickView variable. Oh, sorry, yes, there's one very important thing I forgot to show you. There is an important limitation on these formulas. This formula can only return a single value. They cannot return an array of values. This is very important. NPrinting does not support formulas which return arrays. Okay? So I cannot build a filter with a single row with a formula which says, show me all the years greater than 2000. That will not work in NPrinting. Okay? But we can do that in NPrinting, but not by using an NPrinting field filter. What we do is we build a filter based on a bookmark. Okay, so this involves doing something in our QVW, namely building a bookmark. So if I click on bookmarks and I click on add, this shows me a list of all the bookmarks in my default connection. I'll select one and click on OK. Okay, now if we go to the QVW and we apply that bookmark like this, notice how the bookmark is a pretty complex expression. We cannot put that into an NPrinting filter, but we can use this bookmark as a filter in NPrinting. Now, a couple of very important things about bookmarks. The default behavior of a bookmark is clear all selections, apply bookmark. Okay, and in fact, if we build a new bookmark, bookmarks, add bookmark, notice how here there's a checkbox. Make bookmark apply on top of current selection. If you're going to use a bookmark in NPrinting, you almost always want that selected. You want that selected because there are times when your bookmark filter may be applied after other filters, say based on fields and field values, and we typically do not want the bookmark to clear the other selections. We want those selections to remain applied so that all of the appropriate selections are applied to our reports. So you want to select this when you're making a new bookmark if you're going to use it in NPrinting, and bookmarks are the way of applying complex formulas as filters to the QVW. So I'll just save this. Finally, I'm going to build a filter which will set the value of an existing ClickView variable. Sorry. So if I click on variables, click on add, and I click on this browse button here, I get a window with all the variables in the QVW. I will select one and click on OK. And in here, I could either put in a fixed value like this or a variable, right, like this, and select calculate. Any questions about filters, variables, bookmarks? If they come to mind later, please do ask. I'm happy to answer questions at any time of any kind. Okay, so let's save our NPrinting project. So click here, and I will save it in here. This is a pretty typical directory structure for an NPrinting project. You have your NPrinting files, you have your ClickView files potentially, you have templates, and you may want sort of a default directory for output. Okay, the recipients directory you can ignore. So I'll call this training 10. Okay, 10 February 2014. Okay, access is denied. Let's just make sure that got saved. Yes, it did. Okay. Okay, right. Okay, so I've saved my NPrinting file. Let's build some recipients. So I click on recipients. Now recipients, and let me go back to my slides very quickly. As you can tell, I don't like to use the slides too much. Oh, no, sorry, one other thing about filters before we do that. Well, first of all, here, there's a fairly complicated, or there's an explanation of verify filter. in case anybody got confused by that. It's in the slides. But here, very important, if there are multiple filters on the same field, so I have two filters, say, on the country field, okay, and they're applied to two objects simultaneous, or to two different objects in the NPrinting project, only one of those two filters will be applied. Okay, so if I can apply a filter to a report, to a recipient, and to a task. We'll see what a task is in a moment. If I have a country filter for France applied to my report, and I have a country filter for Germany applied to the recipient, the report will be filtered for France. Okay, the report filter will win over the recipient filter or the task filter. The reason is filters are applied in this order. Task filter is applied first, then we grab the first recipient in the task and apply the recipient filters. We then cycle through all the reports for that recipient in the task and apply the report filters one by one. We then go back and go to the next recipient and apply the recipient filter and cycle through the reports again. Okay, this makes NPrinting much more efficient. It also means, for instance, if we have a report filter based on country and a recipient filter based on country, the recipient filter gets applied, but then the report filter gets applied and removes the recipient filter. Okay, in the same way, if we have a bookmark on our report, okay, and the bookmark is not applied on top of current selections, it will clear the task and recipient filters. Very important to remember. It's in the notes here, and I just wanted to quickly go over that to make sure that you all saw that. So, getting back to recipients. Recipients are people, organizations, whatever they are, who need to get reports. So I'll build a recipient. Recipients have two basic types of information. They have delivery information. Okay, so I'll give the recipient a name. And I can give the recipient, one or more email addresses. Okay, a local or a network drive. Sorry. There we go. Oops. There we go. Let me just get rid of this. Okay. I can add, subdirectories to the end of this if I want to. I can also build what we call a subfolder. This can be added into various locations in output paths. Okay, this will allow me to save output here and send output via email here. Okay, let's take a look at these three checkboxes. So, NPrinting can use section access security and apply section access limitations to reports. The big limitation here, and the reason that most people are not using this function, is you need the user ID and password. It does not support NT security. It does not support single sign-on. You have to have the user ID and password. Okay, so it doesn't support Windows authentication. You need user IDs and passwords for the QVW. Typically, these are difficult to get. Okay, we don't like normally to store our passwords anywhere other than in the user's brain and in the QVW somewhere. But it's possible to do. This is also much slower than using filters, and we'll see filtering in just a moment. Okay, so I can also here, if I want to encrypt my reports, so NPrinting supports an open source package called OpenPGP, pretty good privacy. It's a public key interface. It means that somebody in the organization, an admin, has to set up, a whole structure of public and private keys. The users send their public keys to the admin. The users encrypt their reports. The admin uses the public key to encrypt the reports, and only the user with their private key can decrypt the reports. That's basically how the architecture works. NPrinting will support this. If you insert the user's pretty good privacy user ID in here, then NPrinting will grab the public key and encrypt the report. Only that user can decrypt it. Okay. Finally, we can also password protect reports using the using the Microsoft Office password protection. Okay, and we can either allow users to open or modify the files depending on what we allow them to do. This can be applied to any Microsoft Office format output based on Office format templates. It can also be applied to PDF format output based on Office format templates. Okay. Finally, we can apply filters to recipients. So if I click on Add here, I can say, you know what, every report sent to this recipient. Sorry, actually, let me do this. Let me do it this way. Every report sent to this recipient will only have data for last year, 2013. Okay. Any questions about any of this? All right. So, this is great. Oh, sorry, I can also do notifications if I want to CC somebody. This email address will be CC'd on every report sent to these email addresses. No additional filters will be applied. It's just a plain CC. Okay. So this is great. I've built a recipient, but if I have 3,000 recipients, there's no way I can do this manually. So the good news is that NPrinting can load recipients from lots of different sources, and we're going to do that from inside what we call a task. So I'll click on Tasks. I'll click on Import Recipient Tasks and build a new task. Okay. Couple of things. We can import from only new recipients, only modified recipients, or new and modified recipients. We can also tell NPrinting to delete any recipients which are no longer found in the source for the recipients. So when I say the source, I mean a text file, Excel, XML, HTML files are all supported, as well as, say, Access, Oracle, SQL Server. All of those sources can be queried by NPrinting, and NPrinting can build new recipients. We can build filters for the recipients, and we can put the recipients in distribution groups. So let's see how this works. I'll click on Recipients Imports. I don't have any to add in, so I need to build a new import. The import effectively saves the import parameters. So where is the source located, and what kind of query do I have to run against that source? So in my case, we'll use a file. Well, I'll do from file. Okay, so I click here. This launches this wizard, and the wizard then says, what's the source format? So I could say Access. I can use this to go straight out to basically any OLEDB or ODBC source for which I have a driver. Okay, or I can say, in this case, Excel, XML, whatever. I'm going to use an Excel file. I click on Next. I use Excel just because it's very easy for me to manipulate. Click on the Browse button. Okay, I go out to find my Excel file, which is in here in Recipients. So this is not typically something you'd have in your NPrinting reporting structure. It's an XLSX file. Select it, open, click on Next. It starts on row 2. I want to show the headers, and I click on Next again. This is a preview of that Excel file. Okay, so sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. So what I need to do now is I need to map the columns in my Excel workbook, or worksheet actually, with the information that I need in NPrinting. Now, let me just expand these. Clearly these have to be in the appropriate syntax, but what I can do now is I can say, okay, this is the full name, right? This is an email address. This is a filter, and we'll talk about this in just a minute. These are distribution groups, so I select Group. And this is a folder name, an output path. Okay? So what I'll do is I'll build, the first row will build a recipient called Elvis Presley with this email address. Elvis Presley will have 2 filters, one based on the salesman field for the Elvis Presley value. Verify filter will be selected, and one filter for the year field for 2012 and 2013. We will build two distribution groups because they don't exist yet, and Elvis Presley will be put into the salesmen and the marketing department distribution groups, and this is the output directory for Elvis Presley. Okay. Helen Brolin, same deal. She has a filter, however, with two values, the Helen Brolin and the Elvis Presley value of the salesman field. Maybe Helen is Elvis's boss. Okay. So, question. If you create an Addo SQL connection to query for email addresses, is this relative to the NPrinting server or designer machine? So, I mean, the query can be set up to run against any machine. Oh, sorry. If I need an ODBC DSN, which machine? Oh, so, no. Sorry, Paul. So, the one where the DB was located. Does that make sense, Paul? You're querying against, wherever the DB is located. And if you need a dynamic server name, right? Yeah. Okay. So sorry, Paul. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you, but I can get somebody from my support team to give you a more complete answer. Second question, if you have the recipient's information in different sources, say emails in a SQL, but the filter's in Excel, no, you have to put everything into a single source. So you'd either load the Excel into SQL Server or whatever, or, use SQL. That would probably be the easiest way. Everything has to be in a single source. Okay. At least for now. Jordy. Yeah. So as I was saying, we do this mapping. I click on Next, click on Execute. This shows me a preview. And I can then click on Save to save the import parameters. Now, I've not executed anything yet. Let me save and close this. So this shows, as you can see here, this shows, where the Excel file is saved. So this saves the import parameters. Sorry, there's another question. Yes, it's possible to load the data into a QVW. Naturally. So for instance, the data that I showed you before is in this chart in my QVW. Right? So I could load this into an Excel file, for instance, and then load that information into my NPrinting project. Right? And this will generate, a filter, an email address, a distribution group, etc. This is a two-step process. Extract from QlikView into Excel, load from Excel into NPrinting. But all of this can be scheduled naturally and therefore automated, right? So as we add new data into the QVW and we generate new lines down here, those new lines would represent new NPrinting recipients, which can be automatically extracted from QlikView and loaded into NPrinting. Okay, so we've set up our import parameters. And in fact, if we go down here into our recipients, we don't have any new ones, and there are no new distribution groups. Okay, but if I go back into tasks and I run this task manually, NPrinting will go out to the Excel file it will build the new recipients, it'll build new filters for those recipients, and it will put the recipients into new distribution groups which get created by that task. So now if I go back to my recipients, I have a whole series of new recipients. If I go to my recipient groups, I have 2 new groups. So let's go in here into the salesman group. We've got all these new recipients. I'll open up this one. And as I said before, Elvis Presley has an email address, a directory where we can save output, and also here, filters, or a filter, really, for 2 fields. Okay. And if I open the year filter, 2 values of the year field. If I open the salesman filter, verify filter has been selected. Okay, there are a couple of very detailed tutorials which explain exactly what the syntax should look like, all of the various elements which we can import. We can use this to remove filters from existing recipients. We can remove recipients from distribution groups. We can add recipients into new distribution groups. At any rate, there are a whole series of functionalities around this, which I won't get into the details of. But the point is, we can completely automate the recipient management process to align it not only with what's in our QVW, but also what is in, say, any number of other sources, including, say, our CRM system, an ERP system, Salesforce, whatever, as long as we can get that information in the appropriate syntax into the appropriate format file, so a text file or XML or Excel, or even if we allow NPrinting to directly run a query against a database which has the information, all of this can be synchronized and scheduled and totally automated so that there's no user intervention. If you have thousands of recipients, and many of our customers do, you really don't want to have any manual processes around this. It's just not really feasible. And this is how you do it automatically. So let me quickly remove all those recipients. Actually, I'm going to delete them manually here. Okay. I'm also going to manually delete my filters. Okay. Later on, I'm going to use this to show how the automation works. When are we planning on finishing today? So we're planning on finishing in an hour. Okay. So we've built some recipients, built some filters, and let's now start building some reports. So there are 2 main types of reports we can build in NPrinting. Let me just quickly open this up. We can build reports which are based on what we call templates. All right. Okay. Templates are Microsoft Office, HTML, and now with our new Pixel Perfect template editor, also encrypted XML files, which contain references to objects in QVWs. And when I say objects, I mean a field, a sheet, a chart, a list box, a ClickView report. All of those are objects for us. Okay. The advantage of template-based reports is you get a whole number of a whole series of functionalities which are within Microsoft Office, HTML, and now our Pixel Perfect template editor, which you can use. And also they offer the ability to deliver outputs in formats like XLSX, PPTX, Word, so Doc, DocX, DocM, etc. You can also build reports based on single ClickView entities. So for us, that would mean a single ClickView object like a chart, or an entire ClickView report, or an entire sheet from a QVW. Now, the entities-based reports can only be delivered in PDF and image format files. They cannot be delivered in Office or, say, XML or any other format. Excuse me. So let's take a look at template-based reports first, and then we'll take a look at ClickView object-based reports as well. So here, if I click on reports, I get a series of different report styles or different report formats I can use. I'll build an Excel report, which means building an Excel file as a template. Couple of things that all reports have in common. So if I click here on filters, all reports can have a filter, and I can click on Add, and I can say every report, every time this report is delivered, it will be filtered for those 4 countries. Now, if I send this report to a recipient that also has a filter, both those filters will be applied. So the recipient that I built has a filter for last year, 2013. If I send this report to that recipient, the final output will be filtered for those 4 countries for 2013 only. Okay. Reports can be cycled. Okay, so if I click here on Cycle, Enable Cycle, I can build a separate Excel file for every value of the field that I choose in here. So let's say I say cities. If I sell in 10 cities, this will build 10 Excel files. If I click on Add again, and I add in, say, the month field, this will build a report for every city for every month. So if I have 10 cities and 12 months, that's 120 Excel files that I will generate. Now, really quickly while we are on this, because I've added in these 2 cycle fields, if I click here on General, notice that I've enabled something called dynamic naming, and I have put the city name and month number into the name of the report. This is so that we don't overwrite one report with another one. Every report will have a different name. Now, while we're looking at this, I just want to quickly show you how dynamic naming works. And the way it works is this. I select dynamic naming here, and I can click on this plus sign and add in any ClickView variable, say. Oops, sorry. I need to build a template before I do this, but any ClickView variable, I can insert the date, so a timestamp, into the name of the report. I can put the recipient's name into the name of the report. Okay, all of this, all of these elements will be positioned in the report name, and notice how if I use these arrows here, I can move. Say I want recipient name at the very beginning of the report, I just shift this up with the green arrow keys, and now the recipient name will be at the very beginning. Okay. I don't really want to cycle my report, so I'll remove these, and I will remove the dynamic naming as well. Okay, so I can also add conditions to all my reports. We'll talk about conditions in the advanced session. So let's build a template. When I click on New, what that does is it opens, or it launches, an Excel session inside of my NPrinting session and opens up what we call the template editor. So I'll click here on Toolbar, and this will show us our Excel ribbon. In my case, I'm running Excel 2013. So it's showing the 2013 ribbon. And let's say I want to add some data into the report, because it's an Excel report. I right-click on Tables, Add Objects. This shows me a list of all the charts in the QVW. I can easily switch between QVWs like this. But I will be mostly using our default QVW. So just a second here. Let me switch back. Okay, and I'll select this chart. Now, this chart, 184, is an object in my QVW. Let me open the appropriate QVW, and it is this chart right here. Okay, now notice that this chart has 4 columns. This has conditional formatting here on the right. These 2 are number formatting, even though it's sales and profit. They are not in currency format. So let's go back, and I can select all of these fields by doing shift-click, and I can position them inside of the Excel file. And let me make these columns a bit wider. What will happen now is I will populate the Excel file with the data from that chart and push those values down the column. Now, this happens in a way that's dynamic, okay? So for instance, if I put a yellow bar here, this yellow bar will get pushed down to the very bottom of the data. So let's preview this very quickly and see what happens. And what happens is we get the data put in from ClickView, no formatting applied, and notice how this yellow bar gets pushed all the way down here. Okay, all the ClickView formatting is preserved. Well, because of this dynamic, or the way that NPrinting populates this dynamically, I can do things like this. I can position myself here, insert a sum function. The range for that sum function has to include the cell with the expression and the cell below. And this range will dynamically expand to include all the data. I can put this anywhere I want. Okay? But the range has to remain the same. I can also, for instance, apply Excel formatting. So let's say I want this in currency. I just select currency here, and this will come out in currency. What I need to do now is select the fields over here. And down here we have a properties window for each field and for the entire chart. And in here I'll say keep source formats. For total sales, no. Use Excel formatting. And by the way, same thing for gross profit. Okay, I can also apply things like conditional formatting. So let's say I want gross profit to have some kind of conditional formatting. I can just use, I don't know, data bars. Okay. All right. Now, let's preview this again. And actually, let me save this first. You typically want to save templates as, if they're Office templates, as the XLSX, DocX, PPTX. Okay. Notice how it prompted me to save inside of this directory, which I set as my default directory. We'll call this Simple Excel Pages. So we're going to use a feature called the Page feature in just a minute. Okay. So now let's preview this. And what it will show us is an Excel file populated with the data. We'll have, the currency format in columns D and E. Sorry, here we go. Okay, right. So we have currency formatting here. Currency formatting here. Notice how this sum function grabs the appropriate location in the column. Doesn't grab the whole column, just the appropriate location. Same thing here. Okay, we're just grabbing, right, rows 8 through 33. And this is dynamic, so it doesn't matter how many rows there are. It'll always grab the appropriate location. Here we've got Excel conditional formatting. Here we have ClickView conditional formatting. And here we have, standard conditional formatting. Right. I'm going to show you one more feature, and then we'll move on to other formats. But if people have questions, please do ask away. So, sorry, I'll show you two more features. One is, let's say we want an image in here. Right-click, Add Objects, and this shows me, all the charts, list boxes, multi-boxes. So I'll select a chart, and now I can drag this in here. In the case of Excel, it just shows us a tag. For other formats, so for Microsoft Word and for PowerPoint, it will actually show us a preview image which we can resize. But if we want to resize it in Excel, go down here where it says max width and set the width, say, to 650. So this is 650 pixels. Say fit width. There's a detailed explanation of this in the slides as well. I won't get into the, it maintains the aspect ratio. There are a whole number of things that happen. There's a detailed explanation in the slides, as I said. And now we'll get our image object underneath the data. So if we preview this again, basically it'll be the same, but down here we have this image object, and this is another chart from the QVW, and it's this chart right here. Okay. Now, the chart has been rendered to be 650 pixels wide. Okay, see that? All right. So one final feature I want to show you, and that's this. Let's say we want a separate worksheet for every country. Right-click on page, add page to current sheet, find the country field, click on OK, and now we can open this node up, grab the country field and drag and drop it into a cell. You can apply formatting up here. I don't really do this, but you can apply formatting to all this stuff. So here, we could do, I don't know, this stuff. I'm not going to do too much in detail. But all right, now, when we run the report now, what we'll get is a worksheet for every country. The name of the country will be in the upper left corner of the worksheet. It will also be in the worksheet tab, okay, right? France, Ireland, Switzerland. Now, a couple of things to note. First of all, notice how this range here is D8, D32. If we go to the Ireland, it is D8, D33. We have an extra row for Ireland. As I said, NPrinting just dynamically picks up the appropriate range. Okay. Notice how we also don't go above the header rows here. That way, if we have numbers up here, we don't capture those inside the totals, which clearly would not be a good thing. Okay. And then down here, we have our chart, and notice how this is filtered for the appropriate value of the country field, right? So this is the Ireland worksheet, and this chart has been filtered for Ireland, Switzerland, UK. Okay. Can you resize the width and height of the chart? Yes, absolutely. I just did, in fact, but let me go back and show you how I did that. So if this is the chart 212, and I select it here, down here in the properties window, here I've set the max width to 650. So let's say I set the max width to 700, and here I say fit width. Okay, NPrinting will always maintain the aspect ratio. Now if I preview it, the width of the chart will be 700 instead of 650. Okay, so if you look up here, it's 700 pixels wide. Okay, let me just very quickly. So you can set the width and the height. NPrinting will always maintain the aspect ratio of the original chart in the QVW. All right. Any additional questions about any of this? Okay. If you have questions that come to mind later, please do ask. So I'll save and close this template and save and close the Excel report. Let's call it simple. And let's now walk through some of the other formats that we can use, or the other templates. So I'll click on HTML. I'm going to do a very, very simple HTML report. So I'll click on New here. This launches a very simple template editor, okay, into which I can add images and data. So if I right-click on Images, Add Objects, I can add in an image object. I just drag it in, okay. If we preview this, it just populates an HTML file with this image object, which is the one that we used before as well. Okay. I can use HTML tags to resize this if I'm smart and know how to use HTML tags. Personally, I'm not that smart, so I don't know how to do it. So we can also add in data. So if I right-click, Add Objects, and select a chart, I could add in individual fields, put them into an HTML table. I can just drag the whole chart in here like this. And now what will happen is it'll render the information into a chart, which is a pre-formatted, pre-built HTML table. Okay. So you have data, and you have image up here and data down here. All right. Any questions about this? I'm not going to, in the advanced session, I'll do some more complicated things. Right now, I'm not going to do anything else in terms of building templates here. So let's save this. And close it. Let me quickly jump to PowerPoint, and we'll get back to Pixel Perfect in a moment. So a couple of things that I want to show you quickly on PowerPoint because I think they're quite powerful and useful. I can click on New here and build a blank presentation just like I built a blank Excel workbook and a blank HTML file. I can also click on this Browse button if I want and select any existing PowerPoint presentation, and I can open that up in the template editor. Now that's very useful for two things. One, many companies have a kind of a default or corporate standard presentation which they want you to use for all reporting. So you can just open that up in the template editor and use it. And you may have a situation where people are already doing reporting in PowerPoint or in Excel or whatever by copying and pasting things in from QlikView. If they are, we can take those reports, open them up in the template editor, add elements in from QlikView in our normal way, and then the report with all the formatting already done will be ready to put into our reporting project. Now, one of the things about reporting is that you tend to spend a lot of time on the formatting. If somebody's already done it for you, don't do it again. So a question, how about if you have images coming from a custom extension such as SVG maps? The answer, unfortunately, is NPrinting does not currently support extensions. We're working on it. Okay? It's in the development path. We do not support extension objects now. So in PowerPoint, typically I want to add in images. So let's right-click, add objects, and I'll do this by adding objects in from multiple QVWs. Okay, so I'll add an object in from here, sales demo, click on OK, and I'll drag the chart in like so. It gives me a preview image, which I can reposition and resize. Okay, now let's right-click, add objects, switch QVWs. Oops. And sorry, it's taking a minute for some reason. And now we'll add a chart object from the second QVW. So we'll select this one and click on OK. We can drag this in as well. Now, a couple of things. Notice that when I reposition this, the PowerPoint positioning features are all available. Right? See that red line underneath? And when I resize this like this, the same thing will happen on top. Okay? Okay, now I can also do stuff like this. I can apply formatting to these. Okay? And let's say what I want is a presentation with a first slide with all the data inside. And then I want a series of slides, one for each country. Well, in this first slide, I'll just put a text box in here. Oops, not very nice looking. Here we go. Okay. And now I can just select these two objects, shift-click, Control-C, copy, position myself on the second slide, paste them in here. And what I'll do is I'll use what we call the page feature, as I showed you in Excel. In this case, it'll make a separate slide for every country. So right-click, add page to current sheet. Now remember, these two objects are coming from two different QVWs. So if I were to select the country field, okay, this one, which is in the Sales Compass QVW, only this object would be filtered because this is the one coming from Sales Compass. I need to select my linked field. Okay, so the linked field will build a slide for every country that's common to both QVWs. Okay, so there's a question about who can receive reports. Anybody, I'll say that again, can receive a report. You don't need a ClickView license. You don't need an NPrinting license. You need access, say, to email. You need to be able to open a PDF file or whatever format file is sent to you, but you do not need any NPrinting or ClickView license in order to receive a report. Okay, recipients do not need any license, any specific license to receive a report. So sorry, let me get back to this. So I have these two objects, which are the same as the objects up here, for now anyway. I position myself on this slide. I applied the countries matching fields to the page feature. I can open this up and drag the field in here. And again, I can apply formatting to this. Now, what will happen is this will be populated with a value of the country for each slide. So we'll have one slide with all the data, and then a series of slides with all of the data for that country only, for both QVWs. Let me quickly save and close this to illustrate yet another point, and that's this. I can now apply a filter. Well, sorry, let's just preview this first and see what happens. And what will happen is I will get a slide for every country. And so it'll build, I don't know, 15 or 20 slides. But it will only show those countries that are common to both QVWs. So here we have, all the data in both QVWs. And here we have France, Ireland. Okay. Notice how if we zoom in, you can see the charts have been filtered. This is filtered for Switzerland because it's the Switzerland slide. Oops, sorry. There, right? It's a Switzerland slide. It's been filtered for Switzerland. This is from the Sales Compass QVW. This is from the Sales Demo QVW. Right? So that's how we use our linked fields to generate the appropriate output based on multiple QVWs, even if we're doing filtering and cycling. Okay. Now, if I were to apply a filter here, and we preview the report again, it'll only build a slide for these 4 countries. Right? France, Ireland, Switzerland, UK. Now, one thing that's very important to remember, these have also been filtered for those 4 countries. Okay? These don't show all the data anymore. The only way to do that, to apply different filters to different parts of the report, would be to block these for filtering using set analysis. But in that case, we wouldn't be able to cycle through them down here unless they were clones of the same chart. Okay. I'm going to quickly show you Pixel Perfect, and this is in beta, but it will be released. This will be released later this month. So Pixel Perfect has all of the standard functionality of all NPrinting reports. The only difference is the template editor is different. So this is a more traditional style template editor. Okay. And what it allows you to do are things like this. Let's say I've only started using it myself recently, so bear with me. Didn't want to do that either. So let's say we want to build a chart with some data from QlikView, and we want very high resolution PDF output. Okay. What we can do is, here, select chart. Do this in here. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of how this works, but I'll make a line chart, say, click on next, and I can, I'll keep the appearance the same. Okay, I've got 2 series in here, and I don't want to put the data points out there. Let's say I want to see, I don't know, top 10. Okay. Okay. And I'll go in here, and here it says series binding. I'll say, okay, I want this one, series 1 to be, forgot to do the most important part. Right-click, add objects, chart 184. Okay, so I'll be using the data from chart 184 inside of this chart, inside of the chart that I built in here. And so let me go back in here and say, I'll call this sales. I'll call this profit. And I will say, okay, let me set this to, total sales for products. And I'll set this one to gross profit for my products. Okay. And as I was saying, I can, I can do things like top N. So I can say, show me, the top 10 products. Okay. And, there are all kinds of other formatting capabilities, including, changing the primary axis and things like that. I won't get it. Again, I will not get into this stuff right now. It's just too complicated for the basic course. And so now what will happen is we can preview this, and it'll render an appropriate chart. I probably want to change the this, and I can go back here, make this wider. Okay. This style reporting also allows us to do what's called banding, so a separate section for every value of a dimension. Again, clearly, I should be, these are the 2 categories which are other, so maybe top 10 wasn't a good idea. At any rate, so it's possible to do all kinds of other things, like I can build, for instance, a section, levels, and so I can build a section for each year, and I can put the data inside. I can do totals for the pages. I can do subtotals for the pages, things like that. So is Pixel Perfect from Vizubi or other third-party software? So it's part of the NPrinting template. It's one of the NPrinting template editors, or it's part of the NPrinting template editor. Exactly. Sorry, it also supports click view images, just like our other template editors do. Okay, so I can right click here, add objects, and select, say, an image object like chart 212, and I can put this into a report. Okay, so it doesn't just support data like this. Okay. Right. Clearly here, I mean, in terms of sizing and stuff like that, I need to set that in here inside the property grid. But notice also, I mean, the reason we call it pixel perfect is effectively this here, right? So our location can be pixel positioned relative to, you know, the edges of the sheet or whatever. We can do things like adding in. So here, again, I don't really want to get into the details right now, but I can add in. Well, sorry, let me add a level in here. So I can add in a band here, and then I can do things like insert, group footer. And inside the group footer, I can insert things like totals and subtotals, page subtotals, etc. All right. Again, like I said, I don't want to get too much into the details of this. It's in beta right now. It will be released by the end of this month. There are some initial tutorials which describe this, and if we go back to the NPrinting website, as I showed you before, here in the downloads page, you can go to the betas here. Okay, so if you want a copy of this, you can download this from right here. They're going to release apparently a second beta release in a couple of days, so you may want to hold off, but you can get it right now if you want to. Okay, so let's not save this. Well, actually, yes, let's save it. Sorry. Okay. This is not going to render anything very nice looking, but let's just save this. Okay. All right. I can also, I'm not going to get into Word reports, we'll do that in the advanced session, but I can also build ClickView entity reports. And as you'll recall, a ClickView entity for us, and I'll show you this right now, is, so let's say we want to add a ClickView object in here, you know, any image object like a chart, right, a list box, right, a multi-box, but I can also add in an entire sheet from the QVW, okay, and I can add in ClickView reports. So let's start off with a chart. I'll just select a chart. It gets added in here. I can add filters, cycles, and conditions to the report just like any normal report. Okay. Sorry, oops, let me just do something quickly. Okay, so we'll build a second one. We'll call it ClickView report. And I'll click on this browse button again. Notice here I could change between QVWs, right? And if I type RP in here, I get all the report objects. So this is, sorry, let me click on OK here. That is this. Okay, so everybody understands what I mean when I say ClickView report, right? RP02. Okay. And I can also, as I said before, use a ClickView sheet. So if I click on this browse button again, I type in SH, all the sheet objects come up. So SH02 is the equivalent in my QVW of this sheet here. Okay. Now when we render the sheet, NPrinting will maximize click view and effectively take an image snapshot of whatever it sees in here. Okay, so if this is minimized, it'll stay minimized. If this is like this and there's a scroll bar, there will be a scroll bar in the image which we generate. So you got to be a little bit careful about what your sheet looks like before you decide to put it into a report. Okay, sheets can also be put into reports, right? Like in a PowerPoint slide, I could put this entire sheet in the slide in the same way that I can put an individual chart into the slide. Okay, so let's save and close this. And I wanted to build all three of these just to show you what the output formats can look like. Okay, so now we've built some recipients or a recipient, and we have our recipients import. We've built some we've built some filters. We've built reports. Let's deliver those reports to our recipients. So the way we do that is we build a task. We build a report task by clicking up here in the upper left corner. And the report task has a number of different windows, but let's take a look at this one, reports. I click on add. This shows me a list of all the reports I've built. I can select one or many, whichever ones I want, and I click on OK. I'm going to add them all in just to illustrate a few points. So if I select this Excel report, currently the output format is XLSX. Also notice, it shows you which connections you're using. So we have some multi-connection reports, namely this one. But here, if I click here, I can change the output format from XLSX to, say, PDF or whatever, XLS, whatever I want. Okay. PowerPoint, notice this is a multi-connection report. This can be rendered as a PPTX, PPTM, PDF. Okay. Pixel Perfect can be rendered in PDF, but also HTML, RTF, XLSX, CSV. All of these can also be sent to physical printers. The individual ClickView chart can be rendered as a PDF or other images or extracted as a CSV file. The ClickView report can be PDF or images, and the single sheet, when rendered alone, can only be generated as an image. Or this sheet could be an embedded image, a PNG embedded into, say, a PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Down here, if I click here, I can apply security, password protect using recipient passwords, custom passwords, or task passwords. I'll show you where we set those in just a minute. And in the case of PDF, for instance, I can set the resolution. So high quality is no compression. Low quality, I believe, is 96 dpi. Okay. You can also enable security for these. Recipients, anybody who needs to receive a report. So who are they? Well, if I click on add here, I've got, this. Let me add these two in. So this is an individual recipient, and this is a distribution group. Currently, my distribution group is empty because remember, even though we ran that import task, I then subsequently deleted all of the recipients. So all those reports will be sent to this recipient, via email if I want, saved to this directory if I want, and they will all be filtered for last year, 2013. All of them. Okay. If the reports also have filters applied, those filters will be applied to the report as well. I can also apply a filter to my task. Okay. Finally, I can build an email message. So I'll click here on send email. I can type things into the subject line. And if I click on this tags button here, this opens a window where I can insert any ClickView variable and the recipient's name and email address into the subject line. This attachments button allows me to attach all, none, or some of the reports. I can also attach any other file I want. NPrinting saves the file name and path. We don't save the file itself. If this file gets updated every day, we could potentially send out a new file every time we send out this task. Okay. Finally, I can build a text message, HTML text, or insert any HTML file as my email message. Normally, you want to do HTML text. I'll click on this edit button. This opens the HTML text editor. And again, clicking on the tags button will allow me to insert, in this case, the name of the recipient. I can use tags to also, in the case of all HTML output, embed the HTML report into the email message body. This means there's no attachment, and HTML will resize for the small screen sizes. So it's particularly useful for mobile users. If you want to send people reports on their iPhones or their Android tablets, HTML embedded into the email message is a very functional way of getting this done, and a lot of people are using this. So I can do this. I can also do this. I can insert for any report what we call the link tag. This will insert the file name and directory so that users can quickly find their reports if you don't want to send them out by email, or if you want to both send them by email and save them to disk. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so I'll save this message. Finally, here in the general window, I can determine what the task output folder will be. So I can use the default output folder for NPrinting. I could use the recipient folder, which in this case would be here. Okay. I can use a custom folder. Custom folders can be things like FTP destinations. And I can append, say, the recipient name to the end of the FTP destination. Okay. I need to set up the FTP destinations in a different part of the application. I can't do that from here. All right. I'll use the recipient folder for this task. I can also make a single zip archive with all the reports inside by selecting this and giving it a name. Alternately, I could, for each individual report, I could choose to compress them. Okay, these will render them as zip files. I can also insert a task-specific password rather than using the recipient passwords as I have specified. And I can set up a printer if I want to make hard copies of one or many of the reports. So this is a physical printer. If I go to my reports, I can say, you know what, make me a paper copy. Okay. How could it be possible to load email addresses automatically? We'll see this in a minute. Okay, we'll see this in a minute. Pay attention to this. There is a group in here. Okay, the group is empty, the distribution group. Remember, this guy already has his email address, right? Or his multiple email addresses. Okay? So this is my salesman distribution group, which is empty. So I've built an email message. I've inserted my recipients. I've selected the reports that I want, set the output format, chosen the output directory and all this stuff. I can save this, and now I could run this manually, or I could schedule it. Let's take a look at how the scheduling works. So if I click on schedules here, schedules are very simple. They're time-based. I can either do a one-time schedule, or I can say weekly on Mondays and Wednesdays at 2 a.m. Do it 100 times, or do it for 100 days, or do it forever. Do it to until a specific date, like next year. Okay. What I'm going to do are called jobs, and jobs are merely lists of tasks. So if I click on New here to build a new job, and then I click on Add, I will add in both of my tasks. So this is my report task, and this is my import recipients task. Now, tasks are executed in the order we find them in here. Normally, you want to import your recipients before you execute your reports, because you may be loading new recipients in. So when this schedule is executed, what will happen is task number 1, import from Excel, meaning import recipients from Excel, will be executed. And then task number 2, deliver reports to recipients, will be executed. So let's manually simulate that. So I go to tasks, import recipients, and I run this task. Okay, that's the first thing that happens. Now let's go and take a look at our report task. Okay, our report task has a recipient that's a distribution group. That distribution group just got populated because we ran our import recipients task. So Jorge Castro and anybody else who's curious about this, that's how we automate the process of loading recipients into NPrinting and then delivering them reports. And notice that this recipient has got an email, a directory, but also pre-built filters. Okay? All of this can be automated. Jorge, does that answer the question? Just want to make sure that this is clear. This is after the report template editor. This is probably the most important feature of NPrinting. The ability to synchronize NPrinting with all kinds of external applications, including ClickView, but not just ClickView, with regards to recipients. Because otherwise, if you have lots of recipients, you have to manage everything manually, and that is not possible if you have lots of recipients. Okay. Question. I have automatically imported 1,800 names and email addresses, and it worked. Then I added the options filter and folder NP just hangs, had to be stopped with a task manager. Are there limits or suggestions? Yeah, Tamara, we really need to set up a case for this and contact me offline or send a message to support@nprinting.com. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are lots of things that it could be. Commas in the wrong places because NPrinting uses comma separation for the import process is the first thing that comes to mind, but there could be all kinds of other things. I just, now's not the time, unfortunately. Okay, so we've set up our scheduling, we've built our reports, set up our recipients. I'm going to very quickly take a look at some of the other types of tasks we can run. But if anybody has any questions about this, because this is the core functionality, I'd rather spend time on reports and scheduling and import recipients than other kinds of tasks. Okay, well, anyway, if anybody has questions, please do fire away. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll very quickly walk through this. NPrinting can run a reload, okay, of a QVW. So a reload task is very simple. You just select the connection you want, okay, and NPrinting will execute file, Control R. It runs a reload script. This is not Publisher, okay? If you have Publisher, use Publisher. If you're thinking of buying Publisher, you probably should. NPrinting will work, but it's not the ideal way of running a reload because once the reload script is executed, you can't stop it. NPrinting just keeps on going until the script is done. Actually, ClickView keeps on going until the script is done. You can also do a partial reload. Oops, I didn't want to do that, but I did. So Control-Shift-R. Let me just cancel that. Okay. Right, so you can do Control-R, Control-Shift-R by doing a reload task or a partial reload task. We can also do a reduce task. So a reduce task will deliver a QVW to recipients. So let's say I want to send this guy a QVW, okay? This one, for instance, or, any QVW I want. And the QVW, the resulting QVW delivered to this recipient, in this case, will only contain data for last year, okay? Because that's the recipient filter. That will be applied to the QVW. We can also apply other filters. We can deliver it as an email in exactly the same way as we set up the other email for our reports. Okay. Finally, NPrinting can be set up to run a ClickView macro. This is not so useful if you have Publisher because you can just use Publisher to do that, but it may be useful in some situations. So if I click on Macros, click on New, click the Browse button, this will open the ClickView macro editor, right? So I can then, select, say, this, and execute this. Right. Okay, so before we wind up, we got a couple of minutes. Anybody have any last-minute questions? So how to execute NPrinting from QlikView Publisher? It is possible to do this, and actually, let me show you where you can find the information. I mean, the way you do it is you get Publisher to execute an external task. Let me very quickly show you where you find the information, because this is that's the more important piece of this, and that is this. Go into our help section on the website, okay, and here if you type in okay. So here, for instance, and this is a very, very common request, I want to run NPrinting on successful reload of a QBW. Okay, this is I'll put this. Okay, so this is where you see that, and this is where you find information or solutions to issues in general. Okay, so let's say I want to do something with an Excel report. I don't know. I want a pivot table in my Excel report. I don't know how to do that. How to create a pivot table from Excel. Okay. And this shows you how to build a pivot table from inside of your Excel report. So I want to show you the knowledge area of our website because this is very important. To answer the specific question, this is how you do it. What you do is you run a macro on successful reload. That macro changes the extension of an existing XML file. The XML file is saved in a specific location, and that in turn triggers NPrinting to execute. Okay? So that's how you do it. But this tutorial shows you exactly how it works. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay. In that case, thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. If anybody has further questions, you can contact me or our support team. My email address I will put into chat right now. Or you can contact support. Support at NPrinting.com or support at Vizubi.com. So thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. You will be notified when the recording is available, absolutely. And we will provide we'll provide a link to the video and other materials in a few days. Okay. So, again, thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. There are regular scheduled training sessions, so you can sign up on our website. Please tell your colleagues or anybody you think you might be interested. We're happy to have clients on if you want. Many partners sell training, so we do not advertise this or tell clients about this, but if you want to put your client in one of these, that's fine as well. So again, thanks everybody for joining. Have a great day, and I really appreciate your time. We really hope you find this to be a useful product. We spend a lot of time and care, and hopefully making sure that's true. So everybody have a great one, and we'll be speaking soon.